The historic Artemis I mission, which is sending an uncrewed spacecraft on an unprecedented trip around the moon, is now in the final stretch of its historic journey. Orion, as NASA's new space capsule is called, made another pass by the surface of the moon Monday morning, capturing views of notable lunar sites, including a couple Apollo landing sites. The spacecraft then passed just 80 miles above the lunar surface, its second close flyby of the moon. After that, Orion fired up its main engine for about 3.5 minutes, the longest burn conducted on its trip thus far. The engine burn set the capsule on its final path home, kicking off the last leg of its 25.5-day trip. The Artemis I mission lifted off on November 16, when NASA's beleaguered and long-delayed Space Launch System rocket vaulted the Orion capsule to space, cementing its status as the most powerful operational launch vehicle ever built. The SLS rocket's thrust exceeded that of the Saturn V rocket, which powered the 20th-century moon landings, by 15%. Orion separated from the rocket after reaching space and has since been on a journey circumnavigating the moon. About a week ago, the capsule entered what's called a distant retrograde orbit around the moon, allowing it to swing more than 40,000 miles beyond the moon's far side. That's farther than any spacecraft designed to carry humans has ever flown. The spacecraft is now set to traverse the 238,900-mile void between the Moon and Earth. It's expected to plunge back into Earth's atmosphere on December 11, a process that will create enough pressure to heat its exterior to more than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Upon re-entry, Orion will be traveling at 20,000 miles per hour, or more than 26 times the speed of sound. All of that energy will be dispersed as the capsule crashes back into Earth's dense inner atmosphere and then releases its parachutes to further slow its descent before it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. NASA has been preparing for this mission for more than a decade. Following its successful completion, the space agency will then look to choose a crew to fly the Artemis II mission, which could take off as soon as 2024. Artemis II will aim to send astronauts on a similar trajectory as Artemis I, flying around the moon but not landing on its surface. That could pave the way in turn for the Artemis III mission, which is currently slated for a 2025 launch, and is expected to put a woman and a person of color on the moon for the first time. It would also mark humans' first visit to the lunar surface in half a century. The Orion spacecraft's performance has been outstanding, Howard Hu, the Orion program manager, told reporters last week. The space agency did have to troubleshoot some minor issues, including an unexpected communications blackout that lasted nearly an hour. But NASA officials said there have been no major problems, and so far have chalked up the mission as a resounding success.
Michael Avenatti sentenced to 14 years in prison for stealing millions of dollars from clients. Disgraced attorney Michael Avenatti was sentenced Monday to 14 years in prison and ordered to pay nearly $11 million in restitution for embezzling millions of dollars from 4 of his clients and obstruction. Avenatti pleaded guilty earlier this year to 4 counts of wire fraud for each client he stole from and 1 count of endeavoring to obstruct the administration of the Internal Revenue Code. Prosecutors said he obstructed the IRS effort to collect $5 million in unpaid payroll taxes for Tully's Coffee. The sentence handed down by federal district judge James Selna will begin after Avenatti completes a 5-year prison term he's currently serving after being convicted in 2 separate trials in New York. Selna also ordered Avenatti to pay over $10 million in restitution to 4 clients and to the IRS. Michael Avenatti was a corrupt lawyer who claimed he was fighting for the little guy. In fact, he only cared about his own selfish interests, U.S. Attorney Martin Estrada said in a statement following the sentencing. He stole millions of dollars from his clients, all to finance his extravagant lifestyle that included a private jet and race cars. As a result of his illegal acts, he has lost his right to practice law in California, and now he will serve a richly deserved prison sentence. Dean Stewart, an attorney for Avenatti, said in a statement to CNN that the sentence was overly harsh and uncalled for, adding that his client described it in court as being off the charts. When compared with similar high-profile cases, the unfairness is glaring, Stewart said. Avenatti's fraud was egregious, and the court plainly meant to send a strong message. But a 14-year sentence is extraordinarily long given all the circumstances, said CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elie Honig. The prison sentence Avenatti is currently serving was given after he was convicted for attempting to extort millions of dollars from Nike and stealing nearly $300,000 from a book advance from Daniels, his then-client. Avenatti had faced a statutory maximum of 83 years in prison in the California case. Earlier this year, the Justice Department dropped the 31 remaining fraud counts Avenatti was facing after he agreed to plead guilty to the handful of charges. Federal prosecutors said in a court filing at the time that they wouldn't move ahead with the remaining 31 counts of wire fraud, bank fraud and tax-related charges because the judge could consider those allegations when he eventually sentenced Avenatti. In pleading guilty earlier this year, Avenatti admitted to stealing millions of dollars from clients, including $4 million from a client with major disabilities. According to the indictment, after Avenatti negotiated settlements for the clients that required payment to go to them, he would lie to the clients about the terms of the settlements, instead depositing the funds into attorney trust accounts he controlled. He would then embezzle and misappropriate those funds, according to the indictment, and to prevent discovery of his scheme, he would tell clients the settlement proceeds hadn't yet been paid, among other tactics. This story has been updated with additional details.
Real ID enforcement is delayed again to 2025. People wait at the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles office at Atlantic Center in the Brooklyn borough of New York on December 18, 2019. People wait at the New York State Department of Motor Vehicles office at Atlantic Center in the Brooklyn borough of New York on December 18, 2019. More than 14 years after the original deadline, the enforcement of Real ID-compliant driver's licenses or IDs has been pushed back once again. The Transportation Security Administration and other federal agencies were expected to only accept the nationally approved IDs starting May 3, 2023. But on Monday, the Department of Homeland Security announced that the deadline would be extended until May 7, 2025. The federal agency said that state motor vehicle departments need more time to comb through the backlog of applications created by the pandemic. But the virus is only the latest cause for delay in the years-long effort to implement stricter forms of identification. This extension will give states needed time to ensure their residents can obtain a Real ID-compliant license or identification card, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said in a press statement. Real ID-compliant licenses or IDs will be required for people 18 years old and older to fly anywhere within the U.S., enter nuclear power plants and access some federal facilities like military bases. To get one, a person typically will need to show proof of their full legal name, date of birth, social security number, 2 proofs of residence and lawful status. Some states including Washington, Michigan, Minnesota, New York and Vermont have also created their own enhanced driver's licenses that meet federal standards. Nationally approved IDs can be generally identified by a star in the upper right corner. Not everyone has been a fan of the Real ID law. The Real ID Act was passed by Congress in 2005 following the September 11 attacks in 2001. At the time, the 9/11 Commission found that it was too easy for people to obtain driver's licenses. The group called for ID requirements to be raised and nationally standardized. The law was originally scheduled to be enforced in 2008, but several states have resisted compliance over the years on the basis of cost or privacy issues. It wasn't until 2020 that all 50 states including the District of Columbia began issuing real ID-compliant licenses and IDs. All U.S. territories except for American Samoa are also complying. As of 2021, only 43% of all state-issued driver's licenses and identification cards are considered real ID compliant, according to DHS. Others have raised concerns about the law's impact on immigrants, particularly those who are not authorized to live in the U.S. DMV agents will have to make complicated judgments about a person's lawful status in the untied states. The New York Civil Liberties Union wrote in a 2007 statement, before the original deadline for compliance.